Finance and Budgeting Committee meeting for Monday, March 18, 2019 is called to order. The clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Gallagher. Here. Mr. Sharon.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Has anybody signed in for public comment?
No one has signed in.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the March 4th, 2019 meeting. Those minutes are in your packet. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from March 4th, 2019. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Minutes are approved from March 4th, 2019. Matters referred to the committee, 2 items. The first one being Resolution 2019-0071.
Resolution number 2019-0071, authorizing an agreement with the State of Ohio Office of the Auditor in the amount not to exceed $533,000 for an annual audit for calendar year 2018 for the period 1/1/2019 to December 31st, 2019.
Thank you. Angie Rich from the Fiscal Office. This is our annual state audit that covers period January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018. The cost is $533,000. That is the same cost as last year. We did incur a few additional costs last year, if you recall, that we took to Board of Control. So in total, this is going to be less than last year, but it's the same base cost. If there's any questions.
Any questions by my colleagues? Ms. Brown.
With the expenses we incurred last year, we don't anticipate those coming back up again?
As of right now, I do not. I meet with the state auditor management team every 2 weeks, and this is a question I asked them if they're going to do any additional testing. Last year, they did additional testing in payroll, which is why we had to come for an amendment back in November. But as of right now, I don't anticipate that happening.
Okay, thank you.
But I'll bring it before you if they do. Thank you.
Is there any need to pass this item on second reading suspension, or can it go through readings?
It could go 3 readings if you'd like.
Okay. Councilman Schron.
One of the things that we did a few years ago, a number of years ago, when we were using the state, is we would always test it every so often against commercial products for the same price. Do we get any kind of a number to see whether or not what a commercial product would be for the same audit?
We haven't, because the state auditor's office wants to keep this audit in-house. So to do that, we'd have to get permission from them to use an independent firm, which right now I don't anticipate them letting this audit go.
Okay, all right.
Ms. Simon has joined the meeting. Thank you. And any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to refer Resolution 2019-0071 to the full council for second reading?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Resolutions approved, and Resolution 2019-0071 will be referred to the full council for second reading. Next item is Resolution 2019-0072.
Resolution number 2019-0072, amending the 2018-2019 biennial operating budget for 2019 by providing for establishment of a new chart of accounts as a result of implementing the Enterprise Resource Planning System.
Hi, good afternoon. Maggie Keenan, Office of Budget Management. So what we are presenting is proof that we are moving forward with the ERP. We have the new chart of accounts, which, excuse me, is just the new codes for how we set up the accounts in our financial system. And we presented to you the original budget in the current chart of accounts and then gave you the same budget in the new chart of accounts so you could see the difference. It's not exactly one for one. We've eliminated some sub-funds. We have moved things around a little bit, but for the most part, it's the same.
So this is essentially technical in nature and has no significant substantive impact. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions? Do we need this passed under suspension, or can it go three readings?
I'm going to ask that this get passed under suspension only because and maybe we'll get an answer when you do the ERP presentation, but I want this passed when we go live and start entering data directly into the Lawson system, because we're going to have to present fiscal agendas to you that are in the old chart of accounts and the new chart of accounts. So I do want it ready to go by then. So I would ask for at least second reading suspension.
Well, the director has provided cooperation to us on many things, and I'm inclined to respect that request. Is there a motion to that effect?
So move for second reading suspension.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded to refer Resolution 2019-0072 to the full council with a recommendation to leadership to put it on the agenda for second reading suspension. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is
Thank
so
you.
recommended.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Next item is our regular review from the administration on the enterprise resource planning system. There is much that is new. This is a highly significant presentation, and so I invite you to begin.
Thank you, Mike Young, Department of IT, and Jack Ryan. We'll start with going over the agenda. We're going to go through a significant update in the fiscal payroll update, which will also include a significant review on any of the schedule changes and its budget implications and the analysis that was done, which led us down the financials that are associated to that budget change. Time permitting, then we'll get to the HR updates, followed by the ERP budget, and then we'll do a close for any additional questions. Okay. What you'll see here is a representation of where we are in the overall project. You'll notice that from the last presentation of the monthly to this one, we slipped from 52% overall down to 50%. That was a result of adding additional line items to the overall project plan, and the way Microsoft Project recalculates it, it shifts it down an additional 2%. What hasn't changed is overall, we are 14% behind where we thought we should have been at this particular time. When we go over the detail review of the fiscal plan, you'll see where that ties in together. The next slide is a representation of where the schedule looks like by module. The most important is the upper left-hand corner where you see the project is 50% overall. And then each of the milestones for the particular modules, as we go down, you'll see where those all correlate. There are 2 items in the HR stream, which are very small, that we have not had the opportunity to get the final project plans put together, but we'll have that and deliver that by 3/29. So you'll see an update to this in the March report. We don't expect the 50% to be impacted by the additional changes that we have in the HR components.
Okay, I have a couple questions. First, it says, for payroll and WFM, it says October 1st, 2019. But am I correct that in the scenario that you're chosen, that it's not even that, but it's going to be 1/1/2020?
Yeah, correct. Once everyone accepts our proposal for the middle of December, then the overall plan will be changed to reflect the new date.
Okay, and the notion that we're 14% behind schedule, when we extend the schedule, does that put us closer to being on track, or are we still 14 percentage points behind schedule?
We'll still be the 14% behind. That's very much based on a task based on where everything's been completed to date. So shifting the dates won't change the number of tasks to perform, just the amount of time in between completing all of those tasks.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Then the next slide is the exact same thing, kind of what I was speaking to earlier. It's more of a work breakdown structure, which is the task components associated to the module representation that you saw on the previous slide. Right, and this is more of a graphical representation to what those end dates are going to look like. And as we discussed, once the recommendation that we're putting forth today is adopted, the project plans will be updated to reflect the new dates. Forgot to turn this off. Sorry
And,
about that.
and when does this new schedule come up for adoption, and who does the adopting?
We'll get the change order from Infor within the next 2 weeks. It has the financials based on what our projections are. Once we agree to that, then we'll be going through a contract amendment with council for any contract change required for that change order.
Okay, fine.
And at this point, I will turn it over to Jack Ryan, who will go over the fiscal component of the project plan.
Good morning, or good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I was threatened with the fact that this would be my last mountain climbing illusion on the project here for this slide. So I think this just sort of introduces where we are here. That general ledger and flex budgeting and project accounting is summiting, if you want to use that word, and we'll talk about that in detail here.
It's doing what?
Summiting, getting to the top.
Summiting.
Getting to the top.
Okay,
I'm
you're
sorry.
getting to the
We're
top.
climbing a mountain, we're getting to the top here.
Okay.
Accounts payable, procurement, treasury, which is in that next block, they're moving a little slower than expected, and we'll talk about that, but they are moving up. And the payroll is right now is a little bit pinned down, and that's one of the schedule changes that we're going to be discussing. So that just sort of introduces the section here. And like, let's moving on to the next slide here. We have this is just an example of what we go through in terms of a checklist for go live. And for go live readiness, it's very similar to a checklist that RSM might use or any other large consulting company. There's 36 readiness criteria on there. We typically don't go live till they're all green, and they all are green for general ledger, flexible budgeting, and the project accounting activities module. So everything's at 100%. We are going live. Okay. The next slide depicts, and that's kind of our process. I don't know if there's any questions on that. There's a detailed checklist. I wasn't planning to walk through all the items, just to give you, we have a formal structured process in place, was I think the point that I wanted to make here, that we are following. Okay. Okay, the next slide up tells you where we are just in terms of specifics on the general ledger process. The fact that we have gotten to this point on this slide, what it really means that production is open and active today, okay? Meaning what that means in terms of the county's responsibilities, we actually own responsibility for the production environment today. So the Infor has done all of their work. We've done all of the conversion work for 2018 files. And so the production environment's completely up and operational. And that's a terrific achievement for the team. What's left to do between now and 4/1 to officially make this the book of record for accounting is that we will be bringing up to date the January, February, and March transaction files out of the famous system. I'll talk about kind of how that works just briefly in a minute. So by the time we get to 4/1, there will be a final decision made, assuming we don't have any problems, and we're not anticipating any major problems with that on 4/1 will officially be the book of record. And that, alluding back to what Maggie had just presented, so we have the new chart of accounts, and if we're live on 4/1 as the book of record, our reporting can come out of that new Infor general ledger system and flexible budgeting system. So we're right there on top of the mountain, so to speak, for that almost. All right? Any questions about that process?
That's good news. I know
Yes,
it's
sir.
been delayed a few times, but it's good to have this significant accomplishment underway.
Yeah, that's 3 significant modules for us, and we're glad. Just this slide just briefly explains, how this operates going forward. So we haven't converted everything. We still got a lot of work to do for converting accounts payable, treasury, procurement, payroll, accounts receivable, billing. Those are sub-ledgers, if you will, the way they're looked at this point. And all of those systems need to come up. Currently, they're all feeding Famous. So what we will be doing between now and when all those systems come up is we will keep Famous live. People will continue to do what they're doing now until we get the next block of modules up. They'll enter their transactions in Famous, or we'll take feeds from systems that do that. Those transactions are daily passed over in an automated interface to General Ledger. They're reviewed and validated to make sure that we have integrity on the data coming across, and then they're posted and released into the General Ledger system in Infor. What is handled a little bit differently is budget adjustments. Budget adjustments, because of the transformation that we have to make to bring those over, don't come over fully automatic, but what we did to eliminate any dual entry or just pure dual entry for the OBM group, we actually extract those transactions that are related to budget adjustments out of Famous. There's a categorization process that they have to do manually, and then they're automatically loaded into the Infor flexible budgeting system, so that we're always going to be within balance, or within 1 day of being in balance with all of that information. Okay.
So
that's- yes, sir.
when all the elements are live, will the budget update process be fully automatic?
That is an interface that we can make fully automatic. Yes, we can. It's being considered. There's a couple of different ways to do that, but yeah, there's ways to make it so that you're not having to touch this manually. Okay. All right.
Councilman Tron.
Thank you. We just a few minutes ago approved changing all the chart of accounts to go brand new.
Yes, sir.
And that won't even affect, we can't even put it in effect until it goes to our next council meeting, is when we'll vote on it, which then means it gets signed in. So we'll barely have identified the new chart of account system by April 1st.
Okay.
And you're going live with this on April 1st.
Well, we're already in the process of going live. That last few files are being loaded. So keeping in mind that Famous is not shutting down. So we have that system and can report off of that. As Maggie said, we have that system, can report off of that until we get the official book of record, I guess the chart of accounts declaration from council. And then at that point, that would be the point at which I guess we officially have the book of record changeover. So.
Yeah, but every transaction is going to have it's going to get placed in some kind of a chart of accounts, every allocation, every activity, everything. And so I guess I'm curious as to when the training is going to be done prior to going live with all of the general ledger and all the budgeting and all those aspects. If you're going live with this April 1st.
Yes, sir. That training's already been done.
So everybody knows the new chart of accounts, even though we just passed it as a draft.
The chart of accounts has been in the making for over a year. I think probably a year and a half, something like that. So we're doing the translation based on the anticipation that the chart of accounts will be approved as is. Yes, sir.
But it's the operators that then need to be able to say that this used to be in chart of account number 101. It's now going to go in 642. That's a learning curve that I really believe that, having gone through that in other businesses, that.
You want to comment, Meg?
Just,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
so, but as the operator, so as you said, we have been working on this for quite some time. To be clear, when we go live in April, this is predominantly only going to affect the fiscal office staff. So the chart of accounts has been disseminated countywide so that the fiscal officers and the other agencies can look it over. And again, always let us know if we missed something, made a mistake, if they disagree. But this is mostly just going to be us. We do have a tool where I can type in the current index code and then it spits out what the new index code is. Also, when we do the interfaces, there's a whole mapping process that I'm certainly not the best one to explain, but we load something in with the existing index codes and then whatever happens and it spits out a report with the new chart of accounts. So we're going to be learning this and mastering it in the next couple months so that when we go live with the rest of the county agencies, then we are in the best position to help them too. So we're not experts yet, but we cannot go live without the chart of accounts
Oh,
being
no,
in place.
I get that.
Right.
I clearly understand that, but this is the general ledger that's fed by the chart of accounts. Ultimately, every activity, every accounting entry is fed through the chart of accounts, which means that all the employees understand that this used to be where we applied this, and now is going to be applied over here. I just cannot but think that there's going to be mistakes as far as people applying the codes.
Well, yeah, there's going to be mistakes. I
And
mean,
we're
we
going
could,
live in 2
we could
weeks.
say that there's always mistakes, but the employees that really need to know this for April 1st, April 30th, May 1st, know it. We're already slightly comfortable with it. Well, obviously, that's why we're doing dual entry too, because then when I have to type it in with the current, I immediately type in a second adjustment with the new one. It's going to help us put 2 and 2 together. But remember, for some of us that have been here for quite some time, I've memorized these codes for 15 years, so it's
Sure.
going to take a long time to readjust. But we have made it simple. Infor has been really helpful in coming up with tools for us so that you can just really type it in and it spits out exactly what you need to know. So this is going to be implemented as smoothly as it possibly can be, recognizing that people have been here a lot longer than me. I've memorized these codes for 30 years now.
And now they have to unmemorize,
Yeah.
which is what,
Imagine what this is going
right.
to do.
I understand that. No, I get
Let
it.
me just comment, thank you, Meg, I appreciate that. And the other side of that is that these other systems that I mentioned, payables, treasury, procurement, payroll, receivables, billing, probably missing something there, they're going to continue to come into famous with the old index codes and be translated as we do the extract for the daily feed. As those systems go live in Infor, they'll drop them off, and those users will individually, as we do those systems, will be educated in the new chart of accounts in that system. So they don't, all the end users out there that are affected, there's about 600 people on the other end of this that are feeding this thing. They won't really be affected, as Maggie said. It'll be really the core fiscal and OBM team that are initially affected by this. And this is a good opportunity for us to make sure that we've gotten all the kinks out of that. And I think we've tested this in depth, so we're not anticipating any major problems. And we've got the good translation tools in place. Part of the communication that needs to happen going forward, and as we implement these other systems, and we're going to talk about that schedule here in a minute, is making sure that we give ourselves enough time to get that education and that information out there for all these other executive and non-executive groups. So,
I'll be from Missouri in regards to allocations going to the wrong accounts.
okay, and I'm not going to bet against you, sir. But hopefully we can minimize that, all right?
Director Keenan, will the April fiscal agenda be done under the new system?
Will the April, go ahead.
It's good. Yes, it's going to be both. So what we're going to do is present you the fiscal agenda that you know and love and are used to seeing, and then we're going to present the new one. It's going to look different. It's I don't want to say it's not as readable, but you've been same thing. You've been seeing the same document now every 2 weeks or every month. So we'll help you say, you looked here for this. Now you need to look here. So we're going to do them in both, probably April and May. But certainly April will be in the new chart of account if we're live. If something happens and we're not live, then no, I'm not going to do that. But if we're live, I've no choice because live means the new chart of accounts is the chart of accounts. So effectively, I'm going to be giving you the old one just as a reading tool.
Okay, so we're going to have a little challenge over here to understand the new system.
Yes, but I can assure you that we've been preparing for this for months, and we're going to make it as simple as it possibly can be for you so that you get the information you need.
Okay, sounds
Okay.
good. We'll look forward to that.
Okay. Any other questions on that process? Okay. Okay, looking ahead here, some other successes that we have going forward here. This is, what you're looking at is workforce management testing. And there's some really significant work that's being done here. You'll notice that there's a total of, there's these, I think I explained this in in a previous presentation. There are 4 different iterations of what I call functional unit testing for workforce management. We have finished we've finished iteration 1 and iteration 2, and are working through iteration 3. There are different groups of rules, but just looking at the numbers to give you an idea of the work that that team has been doing, there's in iteration 2, there's 1,260 tests that have been conducted. In iteration 3, there's 560 tests total, of which they've actually, there's a typo here, I apologize for. It's actually 317 tests that have been conducted. Their functional unit testing is different from integrated systems testing. And to make a distinction here for you all, functional unit testing, we're taking work coming directly out of a development team with business users, and we're testing, in this case, it's all these different CBA rules. That's the 1,260 or so CBA rules. And they're testing just to make sure, one at a time, make sure every one of these rules works. These rules for for overtime, for everything imaginable that we have in those union contracts right now. So that's functional unit testing. Integrated systems testing will be taking those rules, once we're done vetting those, putting them through an integrated systems test and running them through as though we're running a payroll timekeeping operation for various scenarios in payroll with large groups of employees, pushing those through the system and then running those all the way through a payroll operation. So this is the prelude. You have to get all these rules working at least correctly and make sure they came out of the development process correctly before we put them through an integrated system test and integrate them with payroll and the rest of the system. So hopefully that makes sense. But this group, working out of primarily out of the human resources, Douglas's group, has done yeoman's work here in getting us to this point. You'll also notice that you'll see a failure rate that you would sort of look at that and go, wow, we've had a large failure rate here, because you've got rules that would fail we've got several hundred that had to be reworked and then retested. Since this is not integrated systems testing, which we didn't expect those to come out of development perfectly, this is sort of a dialogue back and forth with the development group, as to adjust the rules to make sure they get it right. So I expected a higher failure rate. This was about 10% higher than I'd expected, but they are correcting them very quickly. So and you'll see that in the stats that you have up there. So
When is the IST testing expected on this module?
we haven't reset the IST date based on the discussion we're about to have and go through in the schedule, but once we get through that discussion, we will republish a new date. Okay? Okay, any questions on workforce management? Okay, moving on to the next slide, which is procurement testing. Again, this is true IST, integrated system test here, where we bring together, all aspects of the system. In this case, it was procurement IST, 135 scenarios, only 2 outstanding defects out of that. It was really a very successful effort. Those 2 defects are in the process of being corrected. One of those was, they weren't simple, or they would have been corrected immediately. You can see we've been actually through the bulk of the procurement IST for a while, and hopefully we'll get these 2 outstanding defects corrected fairly quickly here. So again, really a very successful testing operation that was run there. Okay? Questions? Okay. What have we learned out of this process here? There's several things here that guide our decision-making process going forward here in terms of how we do schedules and, adjusting to give us the best success here. First of all is data validation. Data validation, just based on the state of the legacy data that we have in a lot of areas, takes longer than we'd anticipated and was was underestimated by me. So On the other hand, when in the process of doing the data validation, we want to make sure we absolutely get it right. You know, we're not subscribing in the financial area to any soft launches, if I can use that term. You know, we either have the data right or we don't have it right, and we'll launch when we get it right. And that's what you saw happening in General Ledger. We had a couple of data adjustments there to make sure that we had accounted for every one of our data issues and made sure we got it right before we put that schedule together that we just reviewed with you. Okay? Resource contention, we have the same people doing a lot of things here right now, and so that's something we need to constantly account for. We continue to seek some additional staff augmentation where possible. We've had some staff rotation that we'll talk about here in a little bit, but we still have a lot of contention for the same resources. We've got a lot of things going on at the same time. You know, within the fiscal office, you've got audits going on simultaneous with operations, simultaneous with an ERP launch. And so the team has been working hard, but we have the same people doing a lot of things here. Also, just external systems and interfaces, what we've discovered here is that just the amount of time it takes to work through that with the different groups, external groups and internal groups, many external groups in this case for this next block of things that we do. We've got a lot of external interfaces here. We need to allow more time for that to make sure that we get those correctly. And then just the reset time between phases. So it takes time for the team to stop one thing, you know, adapt to the operational things that they're doing, pivot toward the next go live, and then start working toward that. And I think we probably haven't allowed enough time between some of those phases in our initial planning. You know, that, and part of that is caused by the resource contention issue here. So they overlap. And last but certainly not least is we need to allow more time to communicate out, as we just finished talking about the chart of accounts and the need to make sure that just something as simple and yet as complex as that gets communicated out to 600 people going forward. We've got other things to communicate out in terms of how we train, what the impact's going to be, and I guess I'd probably have to give myself a poor rating on that communication going forward. We need to clean that up so we get the right stakeholders communicated to across the county here, and that's something else we need to allow time for. So, yes, sir.
Councilman Trent.
You indicated that dual responsibilities and dual activities and multiple things like audits going on simultaneously with things of that nature are distractions, maybe that's not the right word, that are draws against your time.
Well, not just my time, the team's time.
The people,
Yes, sir.
the team's time.
Right.
Is any of the stuff that's going on in the media a distraction and taking away energy from what should be going on? Because obviously we have some folks that are in leadership positions that are part of that, at least visual part of what's going on in the media. Have you noticed that? And this is a purpose for this meeting, to talk about tough issues.
Sure. You know, to be honest with you, I don't get a lot of feedback that way. I mean, what I can tell you is just in general, I think there's I think people are, it depends on the person, I guess, but some folks are despondent over that. You know, they see this happening and it's, nobody likes that kind of publicity, and I think it's a bit of a distraction.
This is not a like issue. Is it a business issue as far as it's impacting schedules and planning from where you sit?
Okay.
You're an impartial third party.
From a data standpoint, in terms of timing and schedules and stuff, I don't see that as a major impact. I think we stay pretty focused on the schedules that we have working right what's in front of us here, and we try to make sure that we do that with the team. So we're very specific about that. So I don't see that as a major schedule impact, if that's the question. Yes. Okay. All right. So what does this all translate into as we take all of this stuff into account? The proposed schedule that I have up there has some major shifts in it, as we look at that, I'm just going to walk through these 7 areas one at a time. Okay. The first positive thing, of course, we just talked about, which is hopefully will be the official book of record on April 1st, and that's a major accomplishment. The second, so there's no shift there, hopefully, and we don't anticipate any, just to reinforce that thought. The second area is the budgeting. You know, last time we talked about the shift to the Sherpa system. That's gone well. The shift from DEPM to Sherpa, the new Infor product, or that Infor is incorporated into their product line, and doing detailed scheduling with the Sherpa team. They really believe, and I believe, their schedule, that they can hold us to a go-live launch date for all of the basic BFM components to the first part of May. So that one stays in the schedule as planned. The third block here we'll talk about, and that's this block of accounts payable, procurement, cash and treasury, cash book. And I think that area, we shift, last time when I presented this, I said we need to shift that out to June. There's a possibility we could shift out a bit further than that. I don't, into July. We're going to try to keep it as close to June as possible, but there's this possibility that we would overlap to maybe mid-June and possibly as late as July. We prefer not to take the full period for a couple of reasons, because right behind that, especially in the procurement area, we have, we're working in August toward the launch of contract management and strategic sourcing. So we really don't want to run up into that. We want to get this done as soon as we can. But as I stated earlier, we also want to allow enough time to make sure the 600 users that this is going to involve are properly prepared, properly trained, properly communicated with, and that all of our interfaces, and there are numerous ones in this implementation, are properly tested. So that's a little bit of a shift from what we were talking about before, but not dramatic. Okay. Fourth one is just to mention here the fact that we have, again, just resource contention for what's going on in these last three blocks here, the number 4, 6, and 5 there. I don't want to beat that to death, but we do have, in fact, the same resources in multiple areas working, in some cases, overlapping, preparing for one and implementing another one all at the same time. So we're doing that's part of the scheduling exercise of trying to spread these apart to minimize some of that resource contention. Okay. Next one, the September. I skip over one there. The September block here. Is the movement of accounts receivable, billing, and grants management. That one, it's a relatively small shift, and when we look at the cost impact, you'll see the cost impact of moving that May, June, July block and the cost of moving that September block are relatively small compared to the cost of what we have to do for workforce management and payroll. We'll get there in a minute, but. So it's prudent to move that one out, just again, to separate it out from the rest of the pack here so we have adequate time to do that work. And last but certainly not least here, there is the move of payroll and workforce management to December. So that's the sum total of all the changes that we'll be looking at. Okay. Questions before we move off of this screen? I'll have more detailed discussion about each one of these going forward.
What's the difference between general ledger and general ledger all agency?
So the general ledger all agencies is opening up the general ledger so that they can actually go in. There's a lot of people that need to go in and just inquire into general ledger, look at things in general ledger. It involves in those cases, there's a training, to our earlier discussions, a training that needs to go on to before we allow people in there to do those things and expand beyond the 35 people or so that are down in fiscal and OBM. So that's what that is. That opens that up. Okay.
And as regard to payroll and WFM, you're touting how advantageous it is to do it at a year end as opposed to any other time.
I'd love to do that. Can I just defer that? I've got a whole slide on that, a little further down, and I'd like to, if I haven't covered it at that time. Okay.
Well, the question I had about that is with that being so important, are you going to have this scheduled so that there's some contingency time in there, so that it's not scheduled so tight that if anything goes wrong, you're going to get knocked off of that schedule?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And I'd like to specifically talk about the advantages to moving it to a year end here in just a moment. So,
Okay, fine.
okay? All right. Right. Moving forward. The next slide just tells you a little bit about the type of analysis that goes into making this kind of a decision. I don't think this is uncommon this is fairly common project management business practice, but to just kind of walk you through, we looked at 4 scenarios here and looked at the risk associated with the scenario. The risk ratings are not just for the scenario. The risk ratings are, if I run this scenario, what's the risk across the entire project? Because one scenario, like moving payroll, affects other things around it, okay, just because of just what we just finished talking about, overlap, same resources, those kinds of things. So those risk ratings are across the entire project, okay? Risk ratings typically cover, excuse me, 4 areas: people, processes, applications, and systems. The same groupings, by the way, that are in the Go Live checklist, but in detail. So we look at those, and it's a very simplistic risk assessment approach here is what I've used, which is taking into account the impact of the risk and the probability that's going to happen. And you see the scale down there. So if it's very high impact and we know that it's going to happen, it's a 25. It's a simple product, multiply the 2 numbers together solution. There's more complex ways to do risk management, but I just prefer something that's pretty simple that everybody can understand here. So as we go through this, the first scenario said, well, if we just move payroll to October, which is one of the things that was on the table last time we spoke, what would that be? And in doing the analysis on that, it still was a very high probability that we would, very high risk, and very likely that we wouldn't be able to make those dates based on everything we were looking at, okay? So we rated that as a 15. That could have probably easily been a 20. It was sort of in between there, but I left it at a 15. So the next scenario was, well, what if we just move only payroll, nothing else, just move only payroll and move it out to December all by itself and don't touch anything else in the schedule? And while that reduces the risk a little, it became a high risk and it still was likely to happen. That reduced the risk rating to 6, but that's still a high probability and a fairly high risk for the kind of activity that we're doing, because there's other things around us in the project that are still at risk here. Third scenario is, well, I'll move that to December, and then I'll take that accounts payable, procurement, treasury block, and I'll move that maybe out to July, what we just finished speaking about here. And if I just do those 2 things, my risk drops to medium, okay? I've got a possible failure there, but it's less likely that I'll have a problem. And then under scenario 4, we do all of those things. We move payroll to December, we move everything that I just explained. We move accounts receivable, grants management, billing out to September. We move the payables, procurement, and treasury to July, and we end up with a risk rating that is low, we end up with, I think probably a much better solution there. The analysis, any questions on how we did that, or risk ratings, or that approach, before I move on? That make logical sense to everybody? Yes, sir.
What was the original payroll before we started moving it? What was the original date to go live with?
Oh, the original date for payroll.
Yeah.
The original date for payroll was last year in January, which.
And that we were pretty solid, we're going to be able to hit that, as I recall.
No,
You weren't.
I never made that statement, sir.
I understand that, but you were later in the game.
I'm sorry, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound defensive there, but that was, I think we started looking at the day I walked in the door. And-
Right, I'm just talking about the predecessors who came before us here.
Yes, sir, okay.
Okay, so we got to that date, which now is almost a year after your recommended scenario.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
okay. Yes, sir. So moving on to the next page. So if I take each one of those scenarios and I run numbers against them and compare that with our contingency budget, okay, you can see where we're at here. So and I've got a summary of this slide as well, but just this is the basis for the summary that I'm going to move to. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. Just cost out each one of those scenarios. And with a contingency, our estimated contingency, our current contingency estimate of about 950, you can see what we net out in each one of those scenarios. The lower the risk, the higher the cost. In some cases, that's always the case. Okay, so it's a matter of where we want to lie on that. Next slide up is an example of just the staff analysis that we did behind this. There is some science behind this in terms of looking at each and every person on the project, what we would have to do to extend them. The green bars on the project or on the plan there are show when a person would actually roll off the project, since staff costing is our primary cost here. And the numbers, the percentages on that, on the other side of that, are what percentage allocation do I need of that skill set in order to do the extensions that we talked about that make up that scenario, okay? Yes, sir.
Go back to your previous slide where you're rolling off what's left.
excuse me.
It's okay. So
Yes.
by the time we follow scenario 4, there's $116,000 left. Is that a correct analysis of what you got on that slide?
Yes, sir.
So
That's our current estimate.
That, we have taken this thing down 4 more months from what, and actually a full year beyond what a lot of us thought we were hearing before you came on board. So we've taken this all the way down to $116,000. So if anything happens that does not exactly hit on scenario 4, that's what we've got left to work with.
That is currently the estimate of what we have left to work with. yes.
And these funds from the 519 to the 116, I assume that's the bulk of that is going to Infor for our advice?
For these, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Most of that is in.
And this is strictly measuring external expenses. This is not measuring any internal costs that it's going to take for we, the county. Those are not necessarily dollars as much as opportunity dollars that are going to be used.
Didn't take into account opportunity risk.
Nothing whatsoever as far as what its impact on the internal county operations for having this thing.
Well,
going.
other than, we did take in, just by definition, we did take into account the fact that we had to shift schedules in order to minimize impact on county operations to continue those, but I didn't cost those specifically.
Yeah, there's no costing associated. The only costs are that us writing you a check as opposed to any internal costs that this project
Yes, sir,
takes
from a
away
cost
from
standpoint.
being able to get back to the core part of servicing our customers.
Yeah, no, sir, it did not cost that,
Okay, thank you.
okay?
Same on the same screen. First thing is the risk rating of taking it to scenario 4. 3 means medium risk. So medium, am I right in understanding that?
Yes, for
So
3, yes,
Are
ma'am.
you concerned at all that, taking scenario the farthest out is still putting us in a medium risk and not a very low or low? I mean, a medium risk to me seems still not great. If I'm understanding.
I'm not sure I understand the question, ma'am, I'm
The
sorry.
risk level of 3
Yes. Oh, I see
stands
what you're
for medium risk.
saying. Right.
So I'm just saying that, given all the scenarios and choosing number 4, a medium risk to me doesn't seem like, it would be better if that was a low or very low, a 1 or a 2. and we're at a 3. And I'm just asking your comfort level there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so you're asking me what my comfort level is with the risk rating 3 in scenario 4.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I want to make sure I was answering the right question. I am comfortable with that. I think that's the best opportunity we have. You never remove all risk.
Right.
But that removes the bulk of the risk and gives us an opportunity to do some schedule contingency planning, as the gentleman mentioned earlier as well. So,
All right, that's good
Okay.
to know. Second question I had, if you don't mind, I believe in Board of Control, we allowed some of the funding to be taken away from the contingency number for licensing. Am I correct, Chair Miller? Do you remember that any of the licensing that we approved in Board of Control, didn't we ask the question if that was deducted from the contingency? And I thought the answer was yes, that number now is lower than what we thought it was.
Yes, that's a yes. However, they're currently estimating 950,000 here or 933,000 on another chart that I saw. I presume that while some additional costs have been added, they probably found some savings in some other areas that offset some of that. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, Janelle Green from the Department of IT. So we've been working with the internal audit team and the fiscal team to determine expenses that should be charged as capital versus operational.
Right.
So in some of the corrections to the plans that we've done moving forward, we saw some things that should be attributed to capital that should be attributed to capital that we hadn't done before, or excuse me, contributed to operational that shouldn't have been done before. So essentially what that means is that there's been some more funds that were freed up that will go into contingency or unallocated funds. So that's where you see the amount here. And what the amounts are right now are about 937 because there was one item, which I'll get on to my part of the presentation. There's about a $13,000 ESRI portion for the EAM program that should come out of this. But so basically there's just basically shifting what should be capital versus what should be operational. And again, I'll get that more into my slides, but it's about 937,000 that could be factored to cover these costs.
And if I just may, and maybe it's in your presentation, the continued licensing that's going to be needed, I don't think we're finished with that yet. Is that something
Right,
that will
well-
be deducted from the 116?
Well, after the continued licensing, we have some that will be capitalized, but after 2020, we've pushed those ones that we need moving forward. Those would be an operational budget, so it wouldn't be factored in here.
Okay. All right, I'll wait for your presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Bennett?
I guess part of my confusion is if we're using this, on the previous slide, the impact times probability, it would seem that scenario 2 would be a 12, scenario 3 would be a 6, and scenario 4 would be a 2. So am I not following the math correctly?
no, ma'am. Scenario 4 should be a 2. You know what? I changed that. The multiplier there, it actually should be a 2. It's still low risk there.
Okay.
So, no, you didn't miss anything there. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right, thank you.
The
But
typo. Okay.
to Ms. Brown's question on scenario 2, why would the total not be 12 at 4 times 3? And on scenario 3, why would it not be 6 as 3 times 2?
Yeah, I somehow, in the process of making these slides here, the last minute, I didn't pull the latest numbers in there. Apologies, it's slightly off here. So, yeah, 3 should have been a 6. 2 should have been a 12, and the 15 is still valid for 1. Okay,
So Chair, we are at a 2 for scenario 4,
so we're at a 2 for scenario 4.
which puts
My
us then at
apologies.
a low instead of a medium. Okay, well,
Yeah.
Good.
That puts it low.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I like that better.
Okay. All right, my apologies for the typo. Okay? Okay. Going to move on to slide 18. So with this type of analysis, the question is where in that continuum do we want to land? Okay, in the risk cost analysis. Realize the numbers are off just a little bit here, so the line's a little steeper in some areas than I show here. But the principle is the same here, so nothing is lost in that. So what we're recommending is the lowest risk, also has the highest cost associated with it, but buys us a number of things that we've already talked about. It allows us to apply best business practices across the board, because we have the proper time to do that, and we've made sure in the schedule we have the proper time to do that. It allows us to test heavily, not that we wouldn't have, but to test to completely, allocate the maximum amount of time that we can for testing. It allows us to freeze our solution early enough. That was one of the things I'd emphasized the very first time I was in front of this group, I think. We need to be able to freeze our solution and make sure that things are all in place well in advance of the actual go-live dates, and not rush that process. And it allows time to communicate properly to our user audience and stakeholder audience. So those are the things that went into that recommendation, and that's where it lies on the continuum of scale, if you will, on that cost-risk summary. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Councilman Tron.
In the event that we do not hit that December date, and we're taking your recommendation, which is more than $400,000 more expensive to the taxpayers,
Yes, sir.
would Infor stand behind that number to the point where we would not have to spend any more money should it go into January, February?
Well, it's certainly not a question I can answer here, and what I can tell you is that we're waiting. We will be getting a change order from Infor, and it's up to them to come up with the numbers. We have consulted with them, and they agree with the approach that we're using for estimating. I would say that. I'm certainly not going to answer for what Infor would or wouldn't stand up behind at this meeting here. That would certainly be a point of discussion with them. Okay.
Are you not associated with Infor?
No, I work for you guys.
Okay, but I thought you were brought through an Infor relationship.
The confusion there is that initially we were brought on board, myself and several others from my company, Mainsail, were brought on board underneath the Infor contract because that was the most expeditious way for that to happen. We are not under the Infor contract anymore, have not been since for quite a while anyway.
Okay, so
September, I think.
You are independent?
We're independent of Infor. I work for a company called Mainsail, and we have myself and several consultants on the county side of that equation.
The Mainsail was recommended by Infor.
They were recommended by Infor initially, yes, sir.
And was it not a Infor product or company at some point?
No,
Point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
We recommended Mainsail to Infor.
Okay.
The county did, because of a past relationship and the success that we had. And then Infor embedded them into their agreement on our behalf.
Okay.
So that we could streamline that in there. But to answer your other question, and it's worked this way to date, if the accountability for whatever the delay was Infor's, they've absorbed the cost. If the delay was because of county resources or a lack on our part, then they would look to us to absorb any additional extensions to that. So to date, they have absorbed a significant amount of cost for a variety of different things when the delay, they thought they were culpable for.
Can you put a number to that then?
Not right now, I can go.
No,
back
I
and
didn't mean
look.
right now.
But yeah, the
Come-
answer is yes.
Come
I
back
can-
to
Yeah.
our staff and give us the exact amount that they have absorbed as a result of any delays,
Yeah,
and then
we can do
associate that with a cause and action, so we can see what's going
we
on.
can do that.
Thank you.
yeah, okay. Yes, sir. Any other questions on the risk cost chart?
Okay,
Okay,
please proceed.
Okay, so taking a look at a couple of these blocks of implementations, just want to look at that May, June, July block of accounts payable, cash and treasury, procurement. This is just a way of depicting that for your reference here. In terms of why is that one more complex? I've used that term a couple of times. You know, why does this one seem to be a little more complicated than some of the others? What we're really doing is running pretty much 7 simultaneous individual, I was going to say mini projects, but they're not so small in some cases, all in a row. You'll see that we have accounts payable, cash treasury, MHC procurement, and the on-base, transfer of on-base from procurement system from on-base to Infor. All of that's going down 2 different tracks here for 2 different sets of IST and UATs and training, 2 different for each of those groups, and then 1 go live for that block. So just by definition, that makes that a lot of things happening simultaneously. It gives you an idea why when I say we have some staff contention, we've got all those things are happening concurrently. They're happening now, and they're happening concurrently, okay? In addition to that, we have the Sherpa go live on its own go live track down there, as we talked about, and that's on target for May. So that there's not a direct contention in there, but there is some overlap in terms of our technical resources that are supporting the go live for payables, treasury, procurement, and those things. Some of those same technical resources are supporting some of the file extractions and conversions necessary for the Sherpa budgeting operation. All right. So that just gives you an idea of how if you were to look in detail at the project plan, you'd see these kind of connections in terms of the way that things are sequenced out. Okay. Questions? No? Moving on. So, you know, why did we need to adjust this? Some of these reasons on slide 20, I've already covered, so I don't want to be redundant here. But I won't spend any time to speak of on this slide unless you have a question. So I've already talked about most of these. But they all apply to this next block of go live modules.
Do we have go-live dates yet on accounts payable, cash treasury, MHC, and procurement and on-base?
The dates that you saw on the first couple of slides that Mike talked about are going to be changed, you know, based on the outcome of this discussion. And so the short answer is no. The better answer is we'll make those adjustments basically during this week and next week, and we'll have the fully vetted schedule out here as quickly as we can. Okay.
Do you think Sherpa might actually be ahead of some of those other ones?
They're running on schedule for May, so yeah, I would by definition, the way the schedule is laid out, they would come in before the other go live.
Okay, fine,
Which would be a good thing, because that just eliminates a source of contention. That was
Sure.
part of our thought process here.
understood.
Yes, sir. Okay. Next area, I just want to talk about this GHR data refresh. And what is that? I know we briefed that. Not a lot, I don't think, in front of you. We have mentioned it the last time. So what is that? So in the initial implementation of GHR, we had additional data that was needed for payroll and workforce management that was not incorporated into that initial rollout. In addition to that, we found some data discrepancies associated that we wouldn't have necessarily picked up until we started to work on workforce management and payroll. So you put all that together, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to prepare the data that's going to be passed from the GHR system, the Global Human Resources System, drives workforce management and payroll. And it drives it across the set of interfaces. It drives it with some fields that are unique to the county and require setup, user-defined fields, so to speak, in GHR. And it drives it by the fact that once we look at what we actually need for payroll, for example, there's information there in those fields that needed to be cleaned up in a certain way to make it translate for payroll. So what that translates into, that schedule excerpt is accurate. About 22% of the work has been done on this module in terms of this activity. We're probably not going to be finished with that till, mid to end of June, which is what this schedule reflects. And the 3 yellow lines that you see on this schedule, from a project planning point of view, those lines will drive other activities in the overall project schedule down in human resources and stuff. So when we reschedule, we'll be linking this plan and showing how it pushes the other things, and that's how we control the linkage between all those different schedules. Okay? So that's what's represented here. Questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Gallagher.
Are there any costs associated with the refresh?
No, that's all been accounted for within what we're doing here. And Infor is participating and contributing resources at no cost to us for a lot of this effort, by the way. So it's one of those things that we could incorporate into the numbers that Mr. Sean was asking for. Okay. Okay, moving on. This is the slide I'd mentioned, Mr. Miller, on payroll. What's the advantage to year end to go there first here? Year end is a best practices cutover for payroll historically, regardless of which system, which vendor system you're implementing. First of all, we don't have to do any year-to-date conversions. We can, so we don't have any mid-year conversions that we're having to deal with in 2 systems at the same time. So it also means that those year-end activities, when there's a lot of them associated with payroll, I've got a short list there that's not complete, but W-2, not the least of which is getting everybody's W-2s out, ACA audits, tax balancing, audits of employee balances, audits of payments. There's just a lot of things that have to happen there. We can do that in the old system without being encumbered by, having the staff have to not only run the new system, but also do the year-end reporting in the new system at the same time. So those are, from a staff standpoint, especially where we have limited staff in payroll, that's a huge advantage. It also allows us to put the right supporting processes in place. Right now, we have a sort of a disparate way of dealing with things like garnishments, payroll vendors. The way we deal with some of that is different. We just need time to put all those things in place. This allows us the time to get that done. And not the least of which is Infor, our vendor, in this case, is strongly recommends that December year end as a best business practice is what we should be looking at based on our current situation. Okay?
And
Questions?
do we have anything that goes live after payroll and WFM?
We have, I show on the chart, let me grab this here. I show in a January 2020, not as a cost item, but the OBM group has selected first part of next year, January 2020, is when they want to roll out budgeting to all agencies and to start doing the biennial budget planning process on that new system. At that point, they will be live and they will be in control of that, so there's not a budget item associated with that as such. Okay?
So that would essentially be at the same time as payroll and WFM, because year end essentially means January 1. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilman Sean.
Mr. Shaw.
I don't see a lot of heavy testing going on. I see some down here a little bit in the bottom, interface needed to be created and tested. But testing of the actual payroll for all of our county employees, is that going to be going on in that same segment?
I got to ask you, when you say there's not a lot of testing going on, what document are you
Are we
referring to?
testing everything in regards to a person's payroll? So come January 1st, we've tested their bank accounts, we've tested all of the
Yes,
deposits.
sir.
We will have tested all of that. So come January 1st, we've already run a pilot of that exact system, that payrolls before, 2 or 3 payrolls before.
Yes,
To make
sir.
sure we don't have a glitch.
We have plans for full payroll, full parallel payroll testing. Can't say that 4 times in a row. And including testing of everything that you just mentioned in that list. We've got testing with banks, testing with interfaces, testing with, the employee access to their W-2 statements. There's a whole list of testing that
Well,
will
the
take
W-2
place.
is the old system, so we're not going to worry about, hopefully the old system will have
Okay.
done it right. It's the new system come January 1st when you go live, because you're going to cut off 100% of the old system come January 1st.
Yes, sir?
And that first payroll is the one that you cringe over when it goes out because it didn't go to the right bank account. It didn't go to the right 401k or savings account. It didn't go right to the right, whatever person is doing with their funds to pay their insurance or whatever the other direct deposits they've got going on.
Right.
Are we testing 100% of that with either $1 or something like that to make sure the
Yes,
accounts?
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That's part of the testing plan.
Because we were under belief, I think, this group a year ago plus, that this was going to be done a year ago. And so we were being asked these exact same questions prior to your coming on board, Jack.
Okay. Well, we've got a long list of the tests that you just, and I think everything that you just mentioned is on that list, and a lot more that has to be tested in parallel. And moving it to year end just means that we can focus on the things that are really important like that, as opposed to history conversion, for example, or trying to convert a quarter when we've got, 3/4 of the year in, and doing those kind of partial conversions or just lead themselves to error. So, and a lot of extra work. So doing it at year end allows us the opportunity to focus on that kind of testing. So,
It was even suggested we test it with dollars, a dollar account to go into, which is what a lot of.
You had
a lot of
mentioned that before,
organizations-
as I
I
recall.
did, a year ago.
Yes, sir.
Right. And here we are a year later and we still haven't gone live, so.
I wasn't here a year ago, but you had mentioned it since then, so.
Yeah, I'm still just as worried today.
I heard
as
you the second time. Yes, sir. I did. Okay.
So this is by my count, the third major rebaselining of the schedule. How, are we confident that this is the last one?
I would say yes, sir. You can't take all risk out of everything. You don't know what you don't know. But we've tried to allow enough time so we're not having to stand here in front of you with, a month or two shift on something at this point. Like I said, for even the move of this next block out to the possibility of July, we've accounted for that and the cost for that reason. If I don't need till July, we won't take till July. But I wanted to make sure that we were conservative in our approach. Okay,
Okay,
all right.
please proceed.
Okay. Just the last couple of things as we wrap up here. This was the risk slide that I had up before. And essentially, what we've done is we've mitigated all, these risks have come to pass. I put them up there because they were high risk and they were high impact. And so in each case, the things that I've presented here are mitigating circumstances or mitigating approaches to those risks, right? I'm not going to spend any time here unless you have a question.
Basically covers the same thing that we've been covering
Yes, sir.
all afternoon.
I just point out, just circling it back to the risks chart that I had up last time.
Basically, you're saying, well, we identified that these could be problems, and in fact, they all turned out to be problems. And,
Yes, sir.
And we responded to them.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Okay, upcoming activities. Obviously, we're looking forward to completing the process on GL going live, which we've already talked about. Detailed schedule adjustments, getting that in everybody's hands is something we're interested in doing here over the next couple of weeks. Preparing and testing the MHC functionality for accounts payable, preparing and testing the Thomas Reuters and Simpro interfaces for taxes and for treasury. Doing the IST for cash and treasury management and the IST for accounts payable. Getting a better handle on our OCM, our communication plan with everybody. I mentioned that before as something we're short on, and we're still short on it, and that's something we need to catch up on and do a much better job of. And then we are, even now, going to start the review of contract management and strategic sourcing. And get ahead of those solutions to make sure we haven't missed something out there. starting with something as simple as a full demonstration and then moving from there into a CRP, conference room pilot scenario. Last but not least, this plan, the planning that we do, not on this list here, but should have been, that'll be coordinated with the RSM assessment schedule to make sure that we have them plugged in for IST and UAT readiness assessments as well as their operational go-live readiness assessment. Okay? Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I know you've mentioned a couple of times about the communication and lack of it to management. So is that because regular meetings or reporting, or what was it that broke down in the communication that you will now rectify? What are your changes? What is it that you're going to be doing to make sure that everybody's on the same page?
Well, I think, I'll take ownership of that one, okay? I think the lack of, I'll use that term, of proper communication here to both management stakeholders and end users, for that matter, is just a function of me being, I'm going to use the term overwhelmed. It's probably not overwhelmed, just busy trying to keep up with the operational schedule on the project. And so we just need to do a better job of building that part of the team out. We have an OCM arm that does quite well when we just arm them properly, and I haven't armed them properly, bottom line. Okay?
You know, you're going to continue to be, I'm sure, tasked with, I don't want to use the word overwhelmed, but so can you overcome that and improve the communication? Do you have the people and skills to do a better job of communicating so that you don't feel that there's a lack of that?
Yes, ma'am, we do. We have held, I didn't highlight it here, I don't think, but we, starting that process a couple of weeks ago, we held a workshop just to try to get a better assessment of end user impacts out in all agencies. I think that was in our weekly or monthly reportables. And so I've started that process of trying to make sure we get our team pulls the pieces together. It's not their fault, okay? It's just that I need to do a better job of pulling that, working with them to pull that together. Okay. Other questions on this slide? Just wrapping up here. This is just a list of some of the accomplishments that the team has had. I'm not going to read these to you, but they're pretty significant. There's been, despite the fact that we're moving schedules, there's been a lot of good work done. I just want to recognize that. Some things that are not on that chart that I thought were worth mentioning here. There were, to get to the GL point that we're at right now with GL flex budgeting and project accounting, there were 68, total of 68 individual file conversions done through 5 cycles. So that's a lot of file management. That's, I think I may have made the statement before, it's like doing 68 month-end closes from an accounting standpoint. It's been challenging. In order to get the security model in place, we're now up to, there's about 99,000 lines of security authorization coding. It's a 99,000 line spreadsheet, if you will, with a lot of detail in it that had to be reviewed by both the business and the technical team. We've got the new chart of accounts that you all just voted on. And between workforce management and procurement, and general ledger testing, the team overall has done 3,744 scripted individual tests to date so far, and still working. That's an incredible amount of work, just in terms of individual scripts that have been tested. EAM has committed to converting to the new chart of accounts. The way the interface was originally designed for EAM, we were going to do a conversion, and they were going to stay on for some time on the old chart of accounts. In meeting with them, we're just going to go ahead and convert them over at the same time we go live with accounts payable and the rest of that group. So that's a little sub-project, if you will, in there. And our project plan currently is handling we got about 2,000 tasks that we're tracking, and that you'd see the high-level summary, but we're tracking about 2,000 detail items through our project plan. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of the work that has been done and the work that is being done. And I think that concludes my segment, if there's no questions. further questions? Okay. All right, thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Kiran Vasudevan. I'll walk you through the HR modules. So the prior presentation, we had given an overview that we launched the benefits module in GHR, and that has been successful. And then we have a couple other modules that are going live in the following months here. So I'll just give you an overview of those. Okay, we'll start with the HR wins. The setup of the organization supervisor structure, this is very key. As mentioned earlier, this is an integrated system where how you set up GHR has dependencies or relationships for the WFM system, the timekeeping system, and also the payroll system. So that's some work that we had to do in the GHR module. The HR team's done a really good job of setting that up for the executive agencies. I believe my initial count is we had about 1,100 departments that needed to be cleaned up. So that's some of the good work that's been done. As part of the GHR refresh, just a couple of activities we already completed. Work locations in relationship to organization. This is kind of a little bit of a technical term, but it helps identify how an employee is related to an organization. Is it full-time benefits, part-time benefits, is an intern, etc. Some of these setups that are required to execute payroll effectively. The 3 bullets there, the 3, 4, and 5, they're related to the learning management system and the talent management system, and that's progressing according to plan from standpoint of a CRP, which is a conference room pilot where we get our leads and Infor folks, and we do a kind of walkthrough of what the system is going to look like and different options and how to set that up. So these are some of the wins that have happened since the last meeting. Okay, any questions on this one? Okay, all right, going to the next page. In the last update, we demoed the Infor landing page. This is a screen where this is where most of the county employees will go when they launch or when they come into Infor application. It lets employees click into other Infor modules. It also has quick access to their own information. In this module, there are 2 pieces. There is the knowledge base, which is like the employee handbook, the forms, policies, benefit information, payroll information. And also the bottom one there is called Ask HR. So that's a link where employees can click on it and ask questions to HR, and it tracks what kind of question you asked, who has responded to you. It also, if you ask a question on payroll, it also directs you to an article on that page that maybe you can get some help from. So those are the 2 modules that is available there. So the design and the development for this module has been completed, and it's available for a few HR and IT staff to use. HR is currently doing additional training for the support staff that's going to be on the back end of this, answering questions, when employees ask them through this tool. Our original date to launch this was March 15th. We've moved that to mid-May. It's really a county exercise to launch the application. The Infor deliverables have been completed, but we're using the extra time to train the HR staff to properly answer questions in this application. And as we launch other modules like the WFM payroll, learning management system, all those will be accessible from this application.
Is the additional time only needed for training and you're technically ready to go at this time?
That is correct. We're technically ready to go. It is live for certain employees. It's more, this is a change on the employee side, so we want to curate the experience of the change. It's want to slowly roll it out to the employees.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, going to the next one. This is
Hold on, please.
Sure.
Ms. Brown.
On the previous slide, how are the employees to find this? How would they navigate or get to it? What would be I see it's the landing page, but
Right.
the landing page based on what type of search, or the home page?
Yeah, great question. So what we've done is we will be launching an icon to everybody's desktop. They have it today to get to My HR, which is where, as a county employer, I do my time entry, look for vacation approvals, etc. So they will get another icon, which will be the Infor landing page. So you can hit that directly. You can get to it. You can also access it if you're away from I can go to my home and use it from my home computer by typing in a web address. You can get to it that way as well. But from the majority of the county employees, they'll get it to from their desktop icon. Yeah. Okay, talent acquisition. So this is the web portal which we launched December last year for new candidates to apply for county positions. So that this is in production. And there was an ask from the last time, what kind of reporting tools are available? Out of the box, the application has many reporting tools that can be refreshed. So this screen kind of shows what candidates are telling us where they're hearing about county jobs from. So, when they apply for a job, they can pick these different options. So as more and more candidates apply, this is a live statistic that the HR team can use. Other than that, the module is in production. It's in use today. Okay, any questions?
Please proceed.
I was looking at this earlier, and I couldn't really understand the corresponding between the third-party, career fair, college web, Facebook, and all the way down to the pie chart.
Right.
So what does the 43.28 represent?
That is the largest one, which is the company website, which is the Cuyahoga County HR website. That's where they click the link, and what they're saying is that they come there, they look at open positions, and they're applying to jobs through that. So in the application, when you hover your mouse on that, you'll get more detail. This is just a picture, so it doesn't show the details.
The pie chart doesn't really correspond with the analysis on the left.
Oh, it does.
Okay, so, okay. What does the 13.43 represent on the left side?
If I had the application, I could show you, but it's one of the higher ones. It's probably
Internal,
the internal, yes, it's
333.
internal candidate, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, this is meant more for live use. You can bring up the application, hover the mouse, and you can click and get some additional details.
all right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. This is a learning management update on the learning management system. We're doing two things over here. Where the LMS system you can buy and install as a standalone, but we're installing it with the Infor application, so we need to connect it. So that's what's happening. We're integrating the LMS to the GHR module so it can work seamlessly. We also are adding content into that learning management system module. Councilman Sean, you had mentioned, I think, a couple of meetings ago that, creating content in LMS is important. So we're doing that as well as we get prepared to launch the LMS application. There is some dependency related to the GHR refresh, as we mentioned earlier, and we're, working and looking at the project plan to see when we can launch it. Our previous date was end of April, but we will have to make some adjustments to that depending on our project planning that we're doing. And we expect to have that date by end of this month. And the screen over there shows what the employees will see once they launch the application. I'll go to the next page. These are two additional screens that shows all the content that's been created. It's not accessible to anybody except the project team. And some dashboard screens that the HR training leads or certain other people in HR can access to view how employees are doing the training. Okay. Any questions on this system? Okay. Next, going to talent management. It has 4 components remaining. It's succession management, performance goals and development planning, transition management, and compensation management. I've added some bullet points below each to explain what these modules do and the value to the county. I'll just give everyone a moment to read through that, and I can answer any questions if you have. Okay.
Okay, pretty
Next slide.
straightforward.
Yep. So we are continuing some activities for talent management. As mentioned earlier, we did some conference room pilots for talent management in the next 2 weeks of March, so this week and next. We're also doing more conference room pilots for development and succession planning, and after that we'll go into the design and then start to complete the development. As mentioned earlier, like with the LMS application, this also has a dependency to the GHR refresh, and we will have an update on the launch date by end of this month.
Okay.
Okay. Total rewards, I think we had given an update on this module before. This is a module that allows employees to see, more detail on their actual pay stub. It's integrated into the application. The activities for this, the project activities for this module starts this week, but this module requires payroll data to be effective and will align the go live of this along with the payroll go live.
Okay.
Yeah, we may complete the activities earlier, but it'll have to go live with payroll. So that's how we,
What's the value? What are we actually trying to do with this total rewards page?
it's more very prevalent in the corporate space where you look at your pay stub and says what's your how much is your paycheck and how much is the company contributing, additional benefits, value, all of those things. But we are tailoring this to the county's payrolls, paychecks and the payroll system as well.
So are we measuring all kinds of other things that sometimes don't show up on a corporate total rewards program that as a public employee, perhaps, is this really a valuable marketing piece of information to, because this is a public document we're creating here too, by showing percentages and things of that nature. Is this a valuable thing we want to make sure gets out to the public?
We're starting the design sessions this week to see what's possible, and then we'll have more detail of what's available to be shown and what really makes sense for employees to see as well.
I think we need to be conscious of, it has some secondary ramifications, this page.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So those are the kind of the quick updates from the HR side and the remaining modules, but the big focus from the HR team is, making sure we get the WFM and the payroll activities scheduled as well.
Make sure.
Good afternoon again, Janelle Green, Department of IT. So I'll be reviewing the budget and staffing that is associated with the project. Some preliminary comments before getting into it. As I stated earlier, we have been doing activities with internal audit and fiscal to determine capital versus operational costs. And I also meet with fiscal on a monthly basis after month close to review the previous month's expenditures as they post to, and do some reconciliations as they post to FAMOUS. So here we'll look at the consulting services and backfill support. So consulting services, the major change is the change to the RSM third-party assurances contract. We did recently amend to add $30,000 to that particular contract. We still have some existing agreements, of course, with Infor, formerly a part of the cyber agreement. Also Zico and Mr. Lombardo's services to Public Works. Other miscellaneous contracts and inactive contracts total about $411,000. Backfill support. So we do have the portion, this was reviewed last month, the portion of the services that were from Infor services, which is $674,000, and Mainsail estimates for approximately $1.5 million. This is this contract is for staff augmentation, and we do review this quarterly, which I'll also address in a future slide here, for staffing that's working on the ERP project. Also, the HR portion of the backfill support for quick employment that we do have here addressed. Were there any questions about this particular page? Okay. For technical development, we have the consulting and also the data warehouse. So we have DWR that provides a legacy maintenance to the legacy system, FAMOUS, and also Unify. This is the SAP support for the payroll system. There will be an amendment that is addressed that'll add about $100,000 to this contract that is already factored into the budget numbers. Also here, we recently processed another $100,000 amendment to the contract for Navigator. And we already had the approval for the Solex contract, which covers the data lake, which is where data from the legacy systems will reside.
But these things were not unanticipated because your contingency is still running about the same. Is that correct?
Correct. These were anticipated.
Okay.
Under software costs, and maybe Ms. Baker, this will address some of your questions from before. So we had the Infor annual fees for the licensing that was paid in 2017. That was about $1.5 million. Also, we had some payments for 2018 for the licenses payment. That was 1.483 million. And we anticipate the rest of it for this year moving forward. That'll be approximately $300,000 that's coming out of the ERP budget. And then the remaining, there's another about $1.2 million that will come out of IT's operational budget. MHC, there will be a future amendment coming from them for services related to fiscal printing. That'll be about $10,000. Emphasis, as far as the amount that will be processed through the ERP index code, is about $127,000 currently. And also the EAM module, mobility module for Public Works is here at $77,000. And note here is the addition of the $14,000 of the Sherpa business objects and other miscellaneous software and support purchased for the project are listed here. Any questions about this at all?
I have one, if you don't mind. Sure. Just from memory, wasn't the Sherpa business objects a no cost?
There was part that was factored into the agreement with Infor. So there were the licenses themselves, the core licenses that we got from Infor. Right. This is for specifically for the business objects, which is a reporting tool that was not included in the Infor amount. So we had to actually purchase this for it was a little bit over $14,000.
Thank you.
Sure. Any further questions?
Councilman Gallagher.
I'm sorry.
When do we calculate in the cost of county employees?
We are actually going through that process now. So last week we had a meeting with internal audit, and we're looking at GASB 51, which actually directs us on how we address the internal accounting for that. And from what we've been, and part of that discussion is about anybody whose work was 25% dedicated to 25% or more dedicated to ERP will be factored in there. And we're still gathering that information. Just note this goes across many different departments. So we do have to gather that information, and we don't all have access to all the other departments' timekeeping information. Currently, in terms of IT, unless they're specifically dedicated to ERP, we have not seen more than 25% dedicated to the project. So again, we're in a information gathering stage, and we'll have that at some point in the future.
And we keep hearing these stories about how the employees are being bogged down in overtime and things like that. I don't know if they're true or not, but would not this calculation be done at the beginning as opposed to the mid to end?
Right. I think we all agree that this should have been done at the beginning, but we can only, move forward and correct. So that's what we're trying to do.
And where did 25% come from? I would imagine that a minute of county time is a minute of county time as opposed to 25% of the total.
This was from the initial conversations that we had with internal audit, and that's the number that they came up with. So we're moving with their direction. Mm-hmm. So and that's what we're doing. We're not fighting that. We're just going right. Again, we're just doing the information gathering to see where we are and how that affects the budget.
Thank you.
Sure.
So to follow up on that, will anyone who spent more than 25% of their time on installing the project, will the value of their time have to be added up and subtracted from the contingency?
Yes. So that's, again, we're seeing how we have to gather the information to see the time that we're looking at and how that would directly affect the budget. And so also conversely, what we did find is that one of the people that were hired on for the ERP project, their time was being allocated to the project when it should be rolled off into the general fund or general operating. So we'll see some movement there as well.
So if we add the time for what the employees are spending on implementing the project, plus we add the 800,000 or so that we're going to need in order to implement scenario 4 on the new baseline schedule. It sounds like it would be reasonable to assume that we would expend the entire contingency and perhaps and then some. Am I correct about that?
Well, we haven't gathered all the information yet, so I don't want to broach that particular question without having the data in front of me to officially address that particular item.
But there would
But there is a possibility,
There
but
is a risk,
we don't
okay.
have the data yet to confirm or deny that
Councilman
actual
Schwan, did you
statement.
have a question?
I did, thank you, Mr. Chairman. These 25% allocation, will they be capital or will they be operational costs?
If it's more than 25%, that will be capital. If it's less than that, is operational.
Okay, that's what I would have assumed. So that will be directly coming out of the budget for this project, that if it's be considered capital.
Yes.
There won't be any disagreement. We aren't going to try and pull, I mean, we've heard about numbers that are being reallocated based on capital and misallocation between operational. Staying with the 25%, if they were 15% but worked overtime, is that going into, is the overtime being calculated?
That we have not yet determined. So we just met last week to go over this. So right now we're in the preliminary stages. So once we get to that point, we'll look for internal audit's direction on where we need to move from there.
Because I see a potential that there can be some gamesmanship going on. I put in zero extra overtime, or $0 extra of that 25%, but I happen to end up putting in 20 overtime hours towards the project. It would not show up as being in the 20%.
No, I definitely understand what you're saying, but I can't address that at this current time. So once we get knee deep in the data to see where we are, and also working in cooperation with internal audit, we'll look at that and see how everything should be addressed, capital versus operational.
Okay, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this 25% allocation. It's highly possible, as we get close to any one of these cutoff dates, that we're going to be working overtime to get things done.
Yes, that is possible.
I
But
wouldn't
we
even go-
don't, again, I mean, like, what I can say, I like to see data in order to see what we do in those instances. So I don't have that in front of me to speak to it, so I can't say
Having lived with
specifically.
ERP projects in the past, I know that the weekends when this goes live, there will be people working overtime. I will
Yeah, definitely, I'm
be
sure
willing
there will be.
to make a pretty well guaranteed assurance that that's going to take place.
I'm sure there will be.
And where those dollars go, because they're not going to be their straight time hours, which is the 25%. They're going to be overtime hours.
So to slightly address that, we do have some instances of where fiscal, for example, has had some overtime that has been already factored, has already been actual costs that we have put into ERP. So there has been some allocations for that, but across the board, I cannot speak to.
Okay, well, I think as we get closer to draining the entire amount of the contingency, there's going to be less likelihood of dollars being allocated, when the reality is we want to know.
Understood.
If this project breaks through the budget, we would rather know that we went through the budget than we would to be taking out of operating funds.
Understood.
And what's your target date for completion of the analysis of what employees are spending more than 25% of the time on their project, and how much money is attached to that?
We have not yet come up with an actual target date. We're still working through on gathering the data. So I cannot speak to that as of yet, but I can supply that after this. We haven't decided on a date.
I would like to know the date on that, and quickly.
Sure, I will get that for you after this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And on that same vein, I would really like to see our employees independently and now analyzing whether they think they're working more than 25% rather than the supervisor saying that. Because I have a feeling if we ask our employees, they're going to tell us they're working more than 25% in many cases, in which case I'd love to make sure we are properly accounting for that.
Understood.
We don't want to get in any trouble with the auditors.
Absolutely.
Right, okay. Can you tell me,
I'm sorry.
one further question? Within the last month, what things have occurred that had the effect of reducing the contingency, and what things occurred that had the effect of expanding the contingency?
So some of the things that decreased the contingency were some things in relation to licenses that we purchased. Sherpa is one of them. One of the other contracts that we've had come through that we're looking at doing would have decreased the contingency, such as the Esri, and I'll address that later, the Esri mobile GIS app for that project. That's about 13,000. So there was slight variations from that. But to add more funds into the contingency or unallocated funds, there were some things like in terms of, again, looking at operational versus capital. There were some things that were input into the budget that literally should have been moved to operational. So moving it out of the capital, like in terms of MHC's contract and emphasis, or Simpro specifically, the full contract value was added into this budget, and we looked at how it should be broken out after 2019, and those items were moved into operations versus capital. So that's where we had the increase, as well as we haven't fully staffed the team. So with those vacancies, we'll have more money in the capital index than what we probably we should have if we had hires on board.
Okay, so the expansions mostly relate to operations versus capital and unfilled positions.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
So moving on with this slide, this is address the hardware. Again, this number has not changed at 288,000. And the ERP core program team, these are teams, the permanent staff that we have on board here. And we just had that discussion. Some upcoming contracts. So amendments, we have Unify, as I previously addressed in the budget, that will be adding on $100,000 to that coming out of the capital. Also, Mainsail, we, as previously stated as well, we do a quarterly review of their services and to determine need. We did in total budget approximately $1.5 million for that contract, and this amendment will be in lines with that particular budget piece. MAC, we're looking at some fiscal piece that we haven't got the quote from the company yet, but that is estimated to be about $10,000. And again, that was already factored into the budget that I presented a little bit before. Also, the software for Esri, which is a mapping tool for the EAM mobility project, that's about $13,000, and that is also factored into the budget. And all contracts will be presented to, of course, to the Board of Control.
I thought you said the ESRI was not factored in and will reduce the contingency by 13,000.
It was, the last presentation, it wasn't factored in, and it has been factored in since then.
Okay, fine.
Moving on to staff augmentation. So to give you an update on the staffing that we have going on currently. So we have candidates for payroll consulting. So that would be people that will be working on the Mainsail contract that are actively being interviewed. We do have 2 additional information systems analyst candidates that have offers out that will alleviate the Infor technical support that we are being provided at this time. Also, we have 2 additional ISAs openings that are left to be filled, and we are actively interviewing for those roles. Also, a new project manager was added to the team in approximately mid-February. That will alleviate some of the items that are on Jack's plate. So we do have added that staff member currently. Also, an addition has been an intern for the technical support team. And also, fiscal and HR are interviewing potential staff for support through the main sale contract.
Are these all county employees as opposed to Infor?
None of these are in for, so it's either main sale or a direct county employee permanent hires.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And that brings us to a close. Looks like we've lost some. Any additional questions?
I think we've warned people out, either that or they have things on their schedule.
Yes. Yeah,
So-
we had a lot of information to cover today. so.
It was an important briefing, and as we've seen, there's pluses and minuses. The go live on the GL is certainly a big deal, and we're happy to hear about that. But in terms of 6 more months of delay, I'm not excited about that, but it is what it is. So, anything else? Okay,
All right, thank you very much.
thank you very much. There being no further business, I'm going to do the one thing that we can do without any more having a quorum, which is to say that there being no further business that holds our attention, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.